You're listening to Switched On Australia, the podcast that tracks the opportunities and challenges of electrifying everything, everywhere. Switched On is brought to you by the publishers of Renew Economy, Australia's best informed, most read website focusing on the green energy transition, and is supported by Boundless Earth. Boundless Earth uses philanthropy, investment and direct advocacy to help Australia become a global force in a decarbonised world. Hello and welcome back to Switched On Australia, the podcast where we meet the people and explore the ideas powering the clean energy future in homes and communities across the country. I'm Anne Delaney, speaking to you from the lands of the Arakwal people of the Bundjalung Nation. Thanks for joining me. From July 1, the federal government's long-awaited battery rebate finally kicks in. It'll offer eligible households thousands of dollars off the cost of installing a home battery. And the rebate will amount to an upfront discount of around 30% or about $4,000 off a typical battery system. That's a big incentive designed to help more Australians electrify their homes, cut energy bills and contribute to a smarter, more resilient energy grid. According to government estimates, it could save households over $2,000 a year. That's about 90% of an average electricity bill. But if you're thinking of adding a battery, there's a lot to weigh up. What type of battery suits your needs? How do you choose a reputable installer? Can you access both the federal and state rebates? Should you jump in now or wait a little longer? And what exactly is a virtual power plant and why does your battery need to be VPP enabled to get the rebate? To help navigate the ins and outs of home batteries, I'm joined again by the Tesla driving sparkie from Melbourne, Brendan Lang, who runs the business Get Off Gas. Brendan has helped countless households electrify, and while he doesn't yet have a battery himself, he's been holding out for better value. He's been keeping a very close eye on the market. So before we dive into battery tech, rebate details and why energy efficiency still matters just as much as shiny new gear, here's Brendan on what every household needs to consider before buying a battery.
There's quite a few different aspects to a home battery, Anne, and thanks for having me back on the pod. It's a great pleasure to be able to get back in front of your listeners and share my knowledge. Some of the questions you should be asking yourself are about why it is you want to have a home battery. Are you trying to maximize the use of your solar that you've got on the roof and absorb that excess energy during the day and use it at night? Are you looking for backup power in the event of a blackout, if that happens rarely, or perhaps you're in a semi-regional area and that happens really regularly? Or are you potentially looking at joining a VPP, a virtual power plant, and doing some energy trading, which is where you pull energy from the grid when it's cheap and you sell it back into the grid when it's expensive. So there's many different factors to consider.
So let's take that first one where somebody wants to store the excess solar that they're producing. How do I go about choosing the right household battery for my needs?
You might be able to match your battery with your current solar inverter, and that will help with communications and compatibility and the ease of installation. Perhaps you've got an inverter that is a hybrid inverter, so it's ready for a battery to be directly connected to it. That's the first thing. You might also be considering the stackability or the expandability of that battery in the future, and that might help inform your decision whether you're going for a single battery that suits all of your needs now, and you know that that's all the house is ever really going to need, or you want something that can be expanded down the track. There's quite a few different touch points on what might be most suitable to your circumstances and your home. And that's where a good installer and experienced installer can really help to guide you to the right product so you know you're spending your money in the right place.
So Brendan, you're a good installer. Are there particular brands or features that you think offer good value?
Yeah, certainly under the federal government scheme, which is announced to start on July 1, 2025, one of the key tick boxes for a home battery is that it is VPP compatible, so that virtual power plant, which I'm sure we'll touch on a little bit later. That is an essential thing to have the battery be eligible. You've then got a list on the Clean Energy Council's website of approved products under the scheme. And some of those brands are common household names that you may have heard of if you've looked at your solar and this battery space, even the EV space. So manufacturers like BYD, they started out making batteries before they were making cars. They're one of the biggest battery manufacturers in the world, and they make a fantastic product. Tesla, which everyone's familiar with, the Powerwall 3 is their latest home battery, which is a brilliant product, which also integrates an inverter for your solar panels to plug directly in. There's other manufacturers like Sig Energy and their Sage Install product, which is fairly new, extremely new actually, to the Australian market and the global market. They've only been around for a couple of years and producing batteries for under a year, and a few other brands, some less familiar. So it's worth speaking to your installer and understanding what might be most suitable from those manufacturers, because they've all got slightly different product offerings. You can't really compare them apples for apples.
So there's no particular feature in any of those brands that you've mentioned that stand out that people should be looking for?
Yeah, look, one of the key things is probably the blackout protection. Some manufacturers will offer that as a standard and some will not. Some will offer it only for a single phase home to be backed up under a blackout. Like the Tesla product is fantastic for a single phase blackout protection. And the Sergeant Store is great for a three-phase backup protection mechanism. So it can get quite technical once you start looking into the real suitability characteristics of the batteries, and then the size of those batteries as well. The Tesla battery is around a 13 kilowatt hour usable battery that comes in that one single size, and then you need to add another 13 kilowatt hours. Whereas the BYD and the Sig Energy can stack in smaller kilowatt hour compartments, so you can kind of tailor that a little bit more to your budget and also your household needs.
How much do I need to know about my electricity use before I make my choice about a battery?
It's good to have a good understanding, and your installer will also do an assessment of your energy consumption, either via your smart meter or via your solar production and consumption data that should already be being generated for the life of your solar system if you have that. So it's a really critical part of the process to understand what it is that you're trying to cover in that nighttime peak of energy consumption, and then the following morning peak of energy consumption, to ensure that you're covering as much of that, if not all of that, with your storage from the previous day.
Do you recommend people get a smart home energy management system and a smart and have a smart meter before they put the battery on?
Absolutely, it's a really important part of having the whole picture with your electrical infrastructure, and the smart meter rollout in Australia has been going really well. I think I'm not sure what the latest numbers are, but I know that in Victoria we're well over 90% of smart meter installations. So having that done as a first step is really important, because then you can get that information from the grid, as opposed to potentially you don't have solar yet, so you can get a good understanding of where your energy consumption is throughout the day, and then size your solar and battery to suit your personal needs.
So, Brendan, you don't yet have a home battery. You have, however, I know, installed several home batteries for other people. Which one are you going to choose?
Yeah, that's right. I've been waiting, much like many Australians, for the return on investment and the prices to come down. Even as an electrician who can install them myself, it's still been cost prohibitive, and largely that comes down to the fact that I've got a really efficient all electric home that's well insulated and well sealed, so I don't have huge energy costs every week to be meeting with that battery. I've been looking, I've got a single phase home, so I've been looking at either the Enphase IQ batteries or the Tesla Powerwall to deploy on my home, so that I can cover that nighttime peak, but also be a part of the VPP to feed back into the grid that extra capacity from the battery. Because, as I said, we don't have huge consumption in that evening peak. We might have a few kilowatt hours of air conditioning and the induction cooktop and a couple of lights, but really I'll be able to use that battery to meet a couple of demands.
Yeah, you made an interesting point that you already have an all-electric home, and it sounds like it's very energy efficient. So it sounds like it's made for Melbourne weather, which obviously you've got lots of insulation, etc. Do you advise people before they get the battery, for instance, that they should be making their home more energy efficient?
Yeah, well, 100%. And that's not just because I run a business called Get Off Gas. It makes sense to work on the demand side and reduce your consumption before sizing expensive assets like solar and battery, because there's a lot that can be done simply even by insulating or draft sealing to reduce the needs to heat and cool your home. And that's one of the huge energy costs, particularly in the southern states every winter that people are trying to cover, and you don't want to be going and covering a large consumption side use, on your usage side for your heating with a large battery if you could have just done some insulation and negated the need to be using such a large amount of energy in the first place. So certainly a great place to start is with draft sealing, insulation, and electrifying those appliances, so you can reduce the size of your battery and solar that you're having to tip that money into, and go on more holidays instead.
Now, look, I'll come back to some of the nitty-gritty of operating the batteries, but let's move on to this whole issue of the rebates that the government, the federal government, has announced, because it's a very significant development in home energy. Tell me what impact the announcement of the battery rebate, the federal battery rebate, has had for you personally and your business.
Yeah, the whole industry has likely been experiencing something quite similar to me and other small, medium businesses around who engage in the solar and battery space, and it's not something that we're not used to. The solar coaster, the announcements normally come from the stand-up press conference, and a short one-page PDF, and that's all we get out of the either the feds or the state politicians. And then a few weeks later, we'll get a few more details, and that's been pretty typical of this announcement as well when it came out. So we've been met with a lot of questions, many of which we don't have the answers to, and quite a bit of urgency from our customers to say, okay, finally battery rebates here. Let's jump on it. What can we do? How do we get started? And we're actually still waiting for details to really play out. And things like the state rebates that are in place, there was no initial announcement about whether they were going to be maintained and whether you could stack them. There was some indication that you might be able to stack them on top of the federal rebates, and that's played out to not be the case, and they've been starting to get repealed over the last couple of weeks across the various state schemes. So it's quite difficult as a small business to manage these big announcements and see how they're actually going to transpire. We're just keeping up the communications with our customers and waiting for these updates to come through, and yeah, taking the urgency out of it a little bit, because when you're spending large sums of money, you don't want to be in a rush. Otherwise, you'll quite easily make missteps. So take your time, take a breath, and see what comes from July 1 onwards.
So don't necessarily just rush in when July 1 comes round.
That's right, Anne. I think we'll see what we have seen with the solar rebates over the last decade, and that is that as the rebate deeming amount changes and drops down, the battery rebate will be over a 5-year period. The cost of the batteries will actually come down as well in line with that. So you're not going to miss out
Mm.
by any large sums by waiting from the 6 months of this year to next year or the following year. In fact, you might end up getting a better outcome if you just be patient, focus on those other changes around your home, optimizing the consumption side, and then look at getting that battery installed when the time is suitable for you. Now, you might be at that point already, and getting a battery is the logical next step, but everyone just needs to take a deep breath and proceed forward in an orderly queue.
Okay.
We love to queue. We love to queue in Melbourne, so I had to get that in.
Up here in the Northern Rivers, we don't like queues.
You put a red rope out, and people will just line up for anything.
Now, look, I know it's a movable feast, and you're still getting information on it, but just walk me through what you do know about who's eligible, what people need to do to apply, etc.
Okay, so there's a couple of headline items here. You need to ensure you're using an accredited installer, and they're available on the Clean Energy Council's website. Using an accredited product that has the capacity to be connected to a VPP. There's then some capacity limitations. So you need to have a minimum of 5 kilowatt hours of storage, up to 100 kilowatt hours of storage being installed, and only the first 50 kilowatt hours of that storage, the usable capacity, will actually be eligible for the discount under the scheme.
Hmm.
There's also some considerations around the timing. So it's quite important that batteries that are being installed prior to July 1 are not connected electrically and commissioned prior to that date, because they will not be eligible. So yes, quite a few things to keep up with. On grid and off grid is another common question. So on grid being in your general residential metropolitan setting where you've got an electricity meter and you're connected to the grid. That's an on grid connection for your battery. That is suitable under the scheme. Off grid is also suitable. However, there is some fine print around that with regards to how far you are from the main grid connection point of the overhead power lines or underground power lines, and the cost to connect to that grid. So that sort of says that you can't be off grid living in a suburban street.
Hmm.
Yeah, they're the key headlines.
And that's partly because they want the batteries to be aggregated to, eventually join the virtual power plants so it can be supportive of the grid.
Yeah, 100%. And listening to one of Giles's recent podcasts about the power of the connectability of these home batteries, um, and the real influence that's going to be able to have on energy flow through the national electricity market. It's a really important piece of the puzzle that will benefit us all as a society and as energy users on that national electricity market.
Mm. Well, let's talk a little bit more about VPPs. As you say, that the batteries have to be VPP ready if you want the rebate, but you don't actually have to join the VPP. But there are some incentives that seem to be coming through if you do.
That's right. You're not obliged to join. The battery just has to be VPP ready so that you've got the option to join into that VPP at your leisure. Yeah, some people are sort of throwing it out there. They've got concerns about being forced into a VPP. We do not, last I checked, live in a totalitarian, authoritarian state. So we should have autonomy over our batteries from the moment they're installed. But I think there'll be some great opportunities for battery owners to join VPPs and really seek a personal benefit, but also benefit the wider grid.
Yeah, and the government and regulator, they articulating now how advantageous the VPPs can be for the grid. But spell out to me what the advantages are for a consumer joining a VPP.
Yeah, so they can be different in different states, and that's due to our national electricity market being one of the biggest machines actually in the whole world. Runs all the way up the east coast. Everything is connected from the tip to the bottom of Australia up that east coast and into South Australia. And so, as such, different states have different energy prices. For instance, Victoria is the most connected state, being connected to South Australia and Tasmania and into New South Wales. So we've got the ability here to draw hydro generated energy from Tasmania, and solar and wind generated from South Australia. So we've got quite a smooth profile. We don't get these huge peak prices and large negatives in our grid, which is where the benefit can often come from a VPP. And many of your listeners will have heard of Amber and the ability to sell your battery storage energy, which has come from your solar into your battery back into the grid in those peak periods. And whilst that's certainly the case in some parts of Australia, it's not a blanket rule. So understanding what the purpose of your VPP is, and really interacting with that on a nuanced level is a pretty important thing to be across. So don't expect to get a 100 kilowatt hour battery in Victoria and be able to dump that all back into the grid and make a fortune, because it simply doesn't quite work that way with the grid the way that it is set up.
But why should I trust my energy retailer, Brendan? Certainly for us here, our electricity, we've just been notified that our electricity bills is going to be going up significantly. The rates that we're going to be on are jumping by about 25%. Why should I trust my energy retailer when it comes to operating my battery? They might use the power when I think I might need it.
Yeah, they are unfortunately a necessary evil. But fortunately, with the advent of modern retailers like Amber, like OVO, and others that participate in VPPs, they're moving to different business models where they are more concerned about the customer experience, and they're more likely to respect things like reserve levels that you've set on your battery, and you've told them you don't want to discharge below a certain percentage, say 20%. So that's always left in the battery for you. Many of them have got the option to opt out of individual events that are happening in the grid, and they'll say, "Hey, can we dump your battery back into the grid because we need some help right now? Energy is really expensive," and you can say yes or no on the spot. It's important to keep across your VPP terms and conditions, and yeah, you should be offered some sort of financial compensation. Obviously, if you've been left short, there's been some media around this with AGL, I believe, particularly where it didn't go so well for a particular consumer, and his battery was treated differently to what he had expected, and I believe that that's probably not the norm. So you should be able to trust what they're doing, and at the end of the day, we've got the ACCC to lean on, and if you've got a genuine concern, then yeah, follow those pathways.
Can you opt out of a VPP entirely? You said you can opt out on a particular event if something's happens and they need the power, but can
Mhm.
you opt out entirely?
You can, yeah. You may have something in your contract, much like a telephone contract or otherwise, where you've got a minimum notice period or you're committed for 12 months. Perhaps you purchased the battery with the agreement of going into a VPP for a period of time. So you might have to pay a penalty to exit that early. Just check that that's not the case so that you're not left with hardware sitting on the wall, not able to be reconfigured or do the things that you want it to do. But certainly you can opt out of those VPPs just under your normal contract terms.
And so if I am thinking of joining up with a VPP, what kinds of things should I look at for in the fine print?
Just like when you're changing any of your your energy retailers over, you want to be aware of those peak pricing events, and that you've got the correct ability to control your battery and your solar in that event. There's a thing called solar curtailment or curtailment as a whole, which means that you can prevent your solar feeding back into your battery and spilling back over into the grid once your battery is full, because you can be punished for that financially if the grid is oversupplied with electricity at that point in time. So that's a key thing to look out for. Contract terms, as we've been touching on, is pretty important to make sure that you're not going to be locked into something and penalised for exiting early. Yeah, a few considerations.
Definitely. Now, okay, I want to drill down further into what else these batteries can do. Obviously, they can store my solar, but can I charge my EV with my battery? Can my battery charge back to the grid? Can I charge my battery from the grid? Talk me through all of that.
So the battery is when it's charging from either source, being your solar or from the grid. It's just like any other load within your home. So your home electricity supply, the electrons will either flow from the poles and wires or from your solar, and they'll go to whatever appliances are consuming, be it your fridge, your reverse cycle air conditioning, your heat pump hot water, or now your home battery or even your EV. The interesting part is when it flows back the other way. So you can tell your battery in the commissioning phase with the consult with your installer, what do you want your battery to do and how you want it to behave on a daily basis. Do you want it to start filling up immediately from the solar as it starts producing? Do you want it to come on with a particular time of use tariff? Perhaps you've got an energy retailer that allows you to access really cheap electricity during the day or overnight at a particular time, and that's when you want to fill your battery up because you're not, it's not certain that the sun's going to pass overhead for enough of the day that your battery will fill up. And then once that battery's full, you can then discharge it back into the home to run those loads like your fridge and your air conditioning when the energy prices are higher in the grid and you haven't got that solar production. When it comes to charging your electric vehicle, your home battery is going to be quite small in comparison to the battery inside your electric vehicle. So if you're really in a pinch and you need to top up your car just a little bit and the energy prices are really high, you can tip a bit of that from your battery into your EV. And you do that simply by plugging into your normal charger and having your battery set to discharge at that point in time. But you're going to find that for instance, your Tesla Powerwall 13 kilowatt hours is only going to go part the way of charging your 65 or 75 kilowatt hour EV battery. So it's probably not the most economical way of charging your battery in your car from your home battery. You really want to be using it for those household loads in the peak periods. Now, the other part of that vehicle equation, which most people are really, are waiting to hear about, is being able to plug the car back into your home and avoiding the need to have a home battery at all.
And where are we at?
So we're still in their holding pattern. We're waiting on a couple of things. There's a couple of manufacturers out there of solar battery inverter setups which have DC modules which allow you to plug your car via the DC connectors directly back through to the inverter in the battery stack. And that will in turn allow you to draw from the battery in the car back into the home. And at the moment, there's a handbrake on that, pardon the pun, from the vehicle manufacturers who don't want or they don't really know how they're going to manage the warranty process of a vehicle battery being charged and discharged in a different way than it was originally designed to be driven, out on the road. And so people will eventually have the capacity to fill that battery up during low energy prices, the battery in the car that is, and then dump that back into the grid. So it's going to be creating a lot more cycles on that battery than what was originally warranted for in the vehicle. So watch this space. Don't hang out for that to come. Act now on the current technology that we have, which is fantastic, and great rebates available. And certainly don't hang out to be able to plug your car back into your house because now's the time to get that home energy storage happening.
Brendan, a number of people raise concerns about battery fires. And what's your advice to people about the risk of fires for these batteries?
This is an unwarranted concern, particularly in Australia, where we've got really high safety standards. We've got high licensing standards for our installers. The battery standard AS/NZS 5139 goes into really high level detail. In fact, I think they're being really overly cautious, which is a great thing for a new piece of technology. All about the locations that the batteries can be installed away from habitable rooms, the use of fireproof backings and surroundings if they are near habitable rooms. And so that really helps to contribute to a safe installation. Obviously, with lithium ion, you've got the potential for thermal runaway if something does go wrong, which is an inherent risk with these products. But we're really well protected from that, and the likelihood of having a house battery or home battery go wrong and cause a fire is extremely, extremely low.
Because these batteries are much better regulated than the ones that are put into, some of the e-scooters and some of the smaller electrical appliances, aren't they?
100%. These products are engineered to within an inch of their life. They're so well built. They're so well tested. They've been around. Many of them have been around for a really long time now. Many of the manufacturers have been around for a long time. If you think of BYD and the Tesla Powerwall and Enphase, they've been making batteries for a long time, and they've proven to be extremely safe products. And they're being installed by highly skilled and licensed electricians. So the reduce of that really reduces the risk of fire to next to zero, really. So we should be really confident that the batteries that we're putting onto Aussie homes are really safe and they're being installed to a really high standard.
Just give me a quick overview of where a home battery should and should not be located.
Okay, so if it's backing onto a habitable room, so that's anywhere you would inhabit. So a bedroom, a lounge room, a study, anywhere where you're going to sit or stand for an extended period of time. Um, if it is not backing onto a habitable room, being your laundry, your bathroom, your garage, then the battery can simply be installed on those walls, no problems. If it is on those habitable rooms, then you need to have some fireproofing material. The existing cladding may be fireproof if it's brick. Otherwise, if it's timber or another product, it may need some cement sheet put around it. There's exclusion zones as well from windows and doors. There's also exclusions from other appliances, particularly gas bottles, gas meters. They've got large exclusion zones. But other things like air conditioners and hot water systems, there's also set distances. 600 millimeters is a pretty good rule of thumb. You want to be that far away from any windows, from any appliances, and then further than that for your gas appliances. But it does get quite technical, and your installer needs to be really across those installation locations to make sure that it meets the standards. Perhaps it's going to go in the garage, which is a great spot, but you then need to have a bollard in front of the battery, or two bollards perhaps, to protect it from a car running into it. Another key consideration with that install location is how much sun that position is going to get. So anything on your north or your west, it should just be completely out of the conversation. You do not want to be installing your home battery there. 'Cause not only will it reduce the performance of the battery, because it will, as your phone does when you leave it sitting out in the sun, it flashes up and says, "This is getting too hot. I'm turning off." Your home battery will do the same thing. It will also reduce the lifespan of that battery and your investment, and expose it to undue risks. So identifying that location where your battery can go is a really, really important part that your installer will do under that AS 5139 at the outset of designing your home battery install.
Yeah. So, a couple of other questions. How do I shut down my system in the event of something like a cyclone?
Super question. I grew up in Mackay, where cyclones were, almost a yearly occurrence, and being prepared for those extreme weather events is critical. And the best way to do it is to have a few trial runs. So you want to go and have a look at your battery and your solar inverter and your electrical switchboard. And there should be some pretty clear labels on there as to what the isolation point is. On your inverter, it might actually be part of the inverter that you can switch and isolate the supply from the solar panels. On your battery, there'll be a local isolation point as well. And in your switchboard, there should be clearly labeled what the battery and solar inverter isolation points are, so that you can turn them off and do a little test run. So simulate perhaps your electricity supply going off and your battery picking up the loads of the house and running with no electricity network, or simulate the inverter and the battery going off when you want to shut everything down prior to that extreme weather event coming through. And that also goes to something as simple as your internet going out. So these devices will rely often on a Wi-Fi connection, if not an Ethernet connection, to communicate the data back through to your phone or your iPad. So go and turn off your Wi-Fi and see what happens, and make sure that you know that you can trust your battery and your solar are going to keep working in the event that your internet goes down. Don't wait until those events happen in real time.
Mm,
Get a practice run in.
that's very sound advice, but probably also get your installer to run you through all of that.
Absolutely. It should be part of the commissioning process that your installer shows you how you should manage those situations when they occur at home.
And what about accessing and configuring the time of use function on a battery? Can I do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that should be done at the commissioning process as well at the beginning. Often you'll be able to tweak them later on within your app, or your installer may be able to log into a portal and update that for you, so that you can, understand and change those charge and discharge schedules based on the tariff periods, because the energy retailers will often tweak them a little bit. Perhaps they'll change them by time or by price. And so you want to have the ability in a couple of years' time, if you need to adjust the functionality of your battery to make the most of it.
Actually, how do I get the whole system back up in contact with the internet when the connection is either dropped out or I've shut it down?
Many will just automatically connect back up to their existing preferences. Some will require you to go into the settings on the app and refine the Wi-Fi network. It's really manufacturer by manufacturer as to how they handle that. But being a device that's kind of designed for that circumstance, they should mostly just reconnect automatically after maybe 5 minutes or so once everything boots up again.
Now, I think you mentioned that some VPPs prevent you from stopping feeding in your solar to the grid. But can I limit my solar feed into the grid when my energy company starts charging me to feed in the solar?
Yeah, you can, and that's that solar curtailment piece that I touched on earlier. So having your battery to have the ability to say, "All right, let's stop feeding in," because I understand as the smart battery what's happening in the energy market at the moment. I'm getting a signal from my VPP to say, "Let's ramp that down." And it does also depend on who your what manufacturer your solar inverter is from, as to the ability to do this one, but also the mechanism as to how that's done. So it's something really important to speak to your installer about to ensure that that solar curtailment piece is really considered.
A lot of this does come back to the quality of your installer. So, how do you advise people to go about choosing a good installer? I mean, I know with the batteries, they have to be accredited, but let's face it, they're accredited and accredited installers.
That's right. Many installers who potentially aren't doing the right thing use that accreditation as a badge of legitimacy, and they slip through the cracks in the application process and then go out and deliver poor quality work with low quality products potentially, which is a real concern for many installers within the industry, as we see with any rebates, particularly in the solar industry. Companies will pop up and pop down and then pop back up again with a different name. So you want to check the track record of the business that you're dealing with, ensure they've been around for an extended period of time, plus 5 years. They're not just a flash in the pan. See if you can get some referrals from previous customers of theirs, and speak to them about the experience that they had, and what products they chose and what the after sales support has been like. See if you can track down an installer who's local to you, so you know that they're going to come back and help. It's not out of the way for them to drop by of an afternoon and get back to answer a few questions or walk you through something or reconnect your inverter back to the network if need be. It is quite difficult to in a skills shortage to find enough people to compare with. But yeah, just stay the course and stay resilient. Keep asking the questions. I'm sure if you listen to this pod a couple of times, you can write down a list of key questions that you want to ask your installer when it comes to a home battery, and make sure you're feeling confident with the answers that they're giving you, that they know what they're talking about, that they can point to their experience and really give you a really high quality outcome.
Brendan, what would you like to see the government, industry, and even fellow Sparkies do better to help more households take the plunge with home batteries?
That's a great question, Anne. Gee, I think it's important that people on my side of the fence, installers, don't provide a cookie cutter solution and just slap in whatever battery works best for their business. That they really take the time and understand the client's needs to ensure they're going to be getting a great outcome personalized to their needs. From an industry level, there's some great work being done by the likes of the Smart Energy Council to coordinate and inform installers about this huge revolution, really, in home batteries. So there's a lot of good stuff being done. Obviously, that work is ongoing, and I don't really have any immediate comments. I feel quite well supported from the industry side. The announcement side that comes from the political part of the equation is often quite difficult to deal with, but not something unusual for us as the installers. But really, a lot of the responsibility lies with the tradies, and it takes the tradie, it takes an electrician, and it takes the solar installer to do these jobs. So we've got a large responsibility to carry in this change, and we need to meet that with a high level of integrity.
Just a final question, Brendan. As someone who lives electrification every day, you drive an EV, you have an all electric home, what excites you most now about where the home energy space is heading?
I think what's really going to be powerful is the ability for these electrification changes and home battery storages to make an impact for consumers who are in the have-nots, if you like, the part of society that can't afford to drive an EV or put in a home battery or electrify their home at the drop of a hat. They're going to reap the benefits of the energy market being more stable and therefore having reduced costs. We're not going to be waiting for big coal-fired generators to fire up and pick up peak demand. We're going to be able to dispatch home batteries from your neighbors in the surrounding neighborhood to smooth out those peaks and troughs. And so helping out those people who can least afford their energy costs will be a really big upside of this battery scheme. And that will go further into council and state government schemes to help with low income households to make electrification changes and really remove one of those large and increasingly unaffordable parts of the home budget, and that's the energy costs.
Brendan Lang, thanks so much again for coming on to the Switched On podcast.
Thanks, Anne. Look forward to chatting again next time.
And Brendan Lang is the founder and sparkie from Get Off Gas, offering a grounded, practical take on what to consider before jumping into home batteries. As we heard, the new federal rebate is a game changer, but it's not one size fits all. Choosing the right battery and installer, understanding how VPPs work and making sure your home is as efficient as possible are all crucial steps towards getting the most from your investment. Thanks for listening to Switched On Australia. I'm Anne Delaney. Catch you next time when we meet more people powering change across Australia's clean energy landscape.